I don't think we've ever subscribed to the notion of, architects as the old guy working in a cave, like with a cape on and then coming out and delivering a finished product. We always see like our best work is coming out of collaboration.
Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Calcote-King. I'm your host, and I'm also the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We're a public relations and content marketing agency for architecture, engineering, and construction and other professional services firms. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com. Eskew Dumez Ripple is a national architecture firm that specializes in design, interiors, and urban planning across an array of markets. The New Orleans-based firm was founded in 1989 and has since evolved into a nationally recognized firm with projects spanning states like Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. And today we're talking to Michael Mantese, Eskew's marketing director. We're excited to pick his brain and learn more about running a marketing department as successful as Eskew's. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat with you. So tell us a little bit about how you got into architecture marketing.
It is a long story that I'll try to keep as brief as possible. So I started my career in the tech industry. After graduating from the University of New Orleans, I moved to New York for a few years. And there, the advertising and marketing ecosystem is just, exploding. And I had kind of like a number of firms to pick from that I wanted to work at. And I ended up working at a relatively small boutique kind of digital marketing and advertising agency for about 2 years while I was there. The cold eventually got too much for me in New York, and I decided to make my run home back to New Orleans. And when I came back here, that kind of world that I was super familiar with there in the, advertising and marketing just wasn't as big here. There aren't as many firms. There's kind of like 2 big ad agencies. And I looked into those, and then just by kind of like happenstance, saw a listing for what at the time was called a content manager. And I had a good friend of mine that was working at Eskew Dumez Ripple at the time. And I reached out to him and asked kind of like what the role entailed. And he told me, it's primarily like writing for proposals and things like that. And since I've started, it's been 5 years now, the role has kind of just like evolved into this whole new world that is kind of like all things marketing and BD now, which I'm super excited to take on.
Awesome. Well, that actually leads perfectly into my next question, which was to talk about how marketing has evolved over your years. And I know in AEC firms, often marketing can be just pure proposal. So tell me how that changed over the years.
Yeah. So I'll tell you kind of my pitch when I started at Eskew Dumez Ripple. It was primarily one that encouraged leadership and everyone in the firm to kind of take a role in marketing and simultaneously leverage all the data we had internally to, make insights into improving or doing things differently. I think for so long in the AEC industry and for architects especially, it's kind of done by gut, we have a good feeling about this, maybe we should do this. Oh, we see this peer firm doing that. And my perspective was really, even though we're a services firm and we don't offer a product that you can like track sales of really closely to see like whether your marketing is performing, my point was really that, you can harness other data and other insights to really drive how you're doing your marketing. So I think that's kind of like the big way the whole industry has changed. It's gone from just being kind of like a person-to-person handshake business to one that's really like national in scope. We consider ourselves a national firm. We opened a second studio in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago. And lately it's been about how do we expand our digital footprint and reach those new prospective clients to really like change the world and elevate our design nationally.
Yeah, I love that. Well, tell me, give me an example of what kind of data you're utilizing.
Yeah. So for everything we do in social media, I'll just give you kind of a peek behind the curtain there. We use a tool called Sprout Social, which I think many of your listeners are probably familiar with. And so, for everything we post, we have like categories or buckets of things, and posts typically like live in one of those. And we try to track how different posts are performing in terms of those typologies. We do similar things for our blog and our website. Our website is integrated basically in the back end into Google Analytics. So like our CMS itself has like Google Analytics side by side. So you can look at pieces of content and then simultaneously see how they're performing. So that's kind
Love
of the
that.
short answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. For especially professional services firms that used to be so bound by geography, the internet has opened that up and made it to where it's no longer a geography bound, handshake driven business. It can be very much so a national, and it changed marketing, kind of flipped it on its head.
Right.
One of the things that I saw on your site that I really want to dig into is the EDR plus. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that has an interesting backstory at the firm. I'll reveal kind of like the nitty gritty of everything it entailed. It was something we've always had a research fellow in-house, and what that person is someone we hire on an annual basis, and sometimes it's two people, one on kind of like a 3-month duration and the other that is on a year-long duration. And they're hired to basically like explore cutting edge topics in architecture outside of like traditional practice, but embedded in an architectural firm.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. Like past fellows have explored things as varied as like our first one was around sustainability, when sustainability was just becoming like a very big topic 10 years ago. Since then, they've explored topics like social justice in the built environment, carbon, trying to make various building and case studies we have internally go completely carbon neutral, and doing kind of like explorations on what that would entail. So many different topics. So the EDR Plus started when the first fellow started, and it was a way for them to kind of like showcase the things that they were exploring through their fellowship. And I think by way of that, we discovered we really enjoyed kind of the content we were putting out through that, and we decided to take it basically firm-wide. So since then, it has harnessed the voices of everyone in the studio to just talk about or explore topics that they're interested in outside of projects. And marketing tries to support them wherever possible to elevate those voices internally and explore some really interesting topics kind of across the industry.
Oh, it's thought leadership, but it didn't
Yep,
start as marketing thought leadership. It started
exactly.
as interesting. Do you put an analytical data eye on that as well?
We do. We look at kind of numbers under the hood all the time, but at the same time, I think it's about um, kind of just elevating the individual voices in the firm. And so we focus less on whether something's going to perform really well and more on if we think something's interesting, we think someone might find things interesting.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the most interesting posts that kind of like blow up. We did one, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, on like a Revit plugin that we thought was pretty dry, and we've discovered since that it's one of our most referenced blog posts, or ER Plus posts, and people continue to reference it basically to this day. The numbers just keep going up, which is funny.
Interesting. So let's tell me what channels do the most resources and time in? Is it social? Is it video? Is it email? Is it all of the above? What is taking most of your focus nowadays?
Yeah, we've got, I think, an interesting outlook on this, in that the thing that kind of comes first are what we call like case studies. And those just occur internally, like when a project is finished, mostly talking about projects right now and not people. And the case studies kind of become the foundation of awards. And then we pull them apart basically to create all these other things. So we use them in social media posts. We basically rework them to live on the website. Sometimes we'll take them and expand on a certain piece to do a white paper or something like that. So it feels like from those case studies, we then are able to focus on a lot of different things.
Got it. So you start
Yeah.
with the actual project, the project itself, and then you go channel. So you break it up
Right.
and populate it and use it as much as you can. Yeah, that's smart.
And sometimes that project feature turns into like a people feature.
Uh-huh.
In the case of one of our recent projects, the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, that is an amazing project and really transformed the museum for our client. But it's also a story about our design director, Eskew Dumez, and basically his long history in civic and cultural projects, and also in the civic and cultural world, just supporting clients behind the scenes on boards and things like that. So it was kind of an interesting story about how he's just been able to serve the arts over the years, both through architecture and then through like, civic activism. So that's become a really interesting story too.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about your team. How big is it, and what are the roles?
We are 3 currently, and it's sort of like ebbed and flowed over the years. I think we've had as many as 4, sometimes 2. So I'm the marketing director, and I'd say like if I am like largely strategy and writing and things at this point, I have 2 people. One, a graphic designer, and she comes from the Nature Conservancy, and so sort of like an ancillary world to architecture, and just brought all these amazing skills in terms of like how we visually display our work. And then we also have a marketing coordinator who is basically 3 months in at this point, but just finished her master's degree at UGA and comes with like all this amazing talent as it relates to like PR and social media and things like that.
Oh, it's great. I was going to ask you about PR. How much do you put into PR?
We do a lot of work to support a consultant that we have. And basically that is, again, supplying them with all of the assets they need to go out into the world and pitch our
Yeah,
stories. So it's a lot of like content creation for them,
yeah,
and then they're doing kind of the pitching
yeah. They're
for
doing the
us.
legwork and getting you guys out there.
Because it's
Yeah,
hard. I
that's
think you can have one person solely focused on PR these days,
absolutely.
and there's so
Yeah,
many avenues, and
yeah.
it can
What's
take a
interesting?
lot of person's time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you haven't mentioned proposal. How is that structured within your team?
I'm always not hesitant, but curious what people want to talk about, because I think marketing and BD are kind of like intertwined in
Yeah.
architecture, but
Hmm.
proposals are very much in marketing's world, even though they're a business development focus.
Well, I always wonder because some marketers, it's like you know, it's their entire world, and others are like, know what? If I have to focus on that, I'm never going to get any of this done. So they silo it off, which I understand because if they, it can it come and then they don't get any of the other important work done.
Right.
So just interested to see how you approach that.
So we have a marketing content calendar that we try to adhere to as much as possible. And even in the face of proposal deadlines, we try to have stuff ready and be very proactive about that content. So when proposals come up, or 5 interviews drop in our laps, we still have time to do that other content creation. But I mean, proposals frequently come first, or
Yeah.
that's how we win work still.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Unfortunately, I mean, as a really design first practice, that's how we compete for a lot of our work. I think maybe for other firms it's a little different, but we are very still proposal heavy. And we see all of the other stuff in marketing, like content creation, supporting that. When we do proposals, we're trying to simultaneously create content alongside the
Right.
proposal that can support it.
Yeah.
So if a client, is reading that RFQ or RFP response, comes to our website, they see something that kind of reflects what we were showing in that proposal.
Yeah, and it helps that if you're involved in the other content, that you have the content to support the proposal and it integrates well. That makes
Right.
sense to me too. So I noticed your website had a dedicated page to technology and innovation. Can you tell me about, one, why you kind of decided to kind of give it that focus? And tell me why you're kind of messaging around that and how you're doing that.
Sure. So we started as a firm in New Orleans, which I think historically has the unfortunate misconception that we are slow adopters of technology. I think it's always been the opposite in our firm. We're early adopters, especially with things like the research fellow. New technology is kind of getting integrated on a monthly, if not weekly basis, in addition to kind of a BIM manager, which I think is, I guess the word would be like uncommon at a firm of our size. Usually you think of a BIM manager in the context of the really, really big firms of the world. At a size of 60 and 70, we've always had a BIM manager. And then also we have a digital technology manager who is focused on all things that integrate with like BIM and Revit 360 and all that, but is also all of the other things we're doing in the office. So, and I think with everything related to the pandemic, it accelerated a lot of that stuff. But we've always been really early adopters of like new programs, new technologies to support the things we're designing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That you kind of if you have a perception challenge existing, to kind of really confront that head first, and to make that a priority. This thing I wanted to ask about was your background in photography, and how does that come into play at all in your work?
It definitely does, in a lot of different ways. I'll talk about just like two that I think a lot of firms could be leveraging photography differently. And a way that I've seen is, so much of our projects in New Orleans are about transforming existing buildings and adaptive reuse. And I think that's a really big conversation nationwide now. And I found where some architects struggle to showcase those stories is when they have amazing finished photography and nothing of how the space was or how it came before. So I'm a really early advocate of getting into the project before we've, designed or demoed everything, to show how it existed prior to our interventions, and then also capturing it afterwards. And so, I've done photography forever. It is, I think, an amazing tool for architects generally. We've also, I think, recently been big advocates too of not just architectural photography as it, traditionally has lived, with like the building from the outside, but those like small moments that users really interact with. And I think maybe that was something I brought in when I started, just having photographed like everything under the sun and being interested in lots of different aspects of photography.
Yeah, that's great. I can imagine. I can imagine it's hard to be the photographer that you're hiring too. So yeah.
We hire externally for some projects, and we work with a lot of really amazing names. Tim Hersley, photographer from Arkansas, who has just an absolutely astounding portfolio. And it's always really interesting for us to collaborate because he sees things in such a unique way, and you're hiring a person like him for his eye.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like trying to collaborate and like show them the stories that we really love in the project. So that kind of like give and take is really interesting when we go to photograph work.
Yeah, that's what you want. You want someone that brings something to the table that you wouldn't bring. So yeah, absolutely. So tell me what's next. What are your priorities for this year?
Priorities for this year. We did a website redesign in 2019, which I think in website terms is getting not long in the tooth, but is due maybe for a refresh. So we're looking at our marketing budget right now in February and trying to figure out what role website redesign will have in that. And I think it's going to be a sizable one this year. In general, I think the website does a great job of showcasing projects and sort of like the granularity of the work. What we want to see it do better, I think, is showcase the people more and kind of like the thought process behind projects. So it's constantly in like a state of becoming. We've made like small improvements over the years, and I think this year it's going to be a bigger one. So I guess that's the big thing that's next.
Yeah, websites are just big projects. Yeah, you're right. My website is 2014. So talk about an old website. I'm feeling the pain, and I'm redesigning ours this year. So
yeah, well, I was going to say too, if it's working for you, then it's working for you, you know?
Yes, but you just after a while it does. It feels old, and you can only patch it up for so long. I'm a
Sure,
big, websites are living, breathing things, and you do have to constantly update them. But the technology, you can only go so long. So they really do get to a
sure.
point. So yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
one. That's it. That's interesting. So tell me about the showcasing people. And you said that your strategy has been to really focus on the projects. When you move toward that focus on the people, do you have an idea of how you're going to approach that? Any sort of idea around that strategy?
For the website, nothing specific yet, but I feel like across the board for marketing, the strategy has been about sharing the things that people internally are excited about and shining a light on kind of just like the work individuals are doing. I don't think we've ever subscribed to the notion of, architects as the old guy working in a cave, like with a cape on and then coming out and delivering a finished product. We always see like our best work is coming out of collaboration. So, and I think especially today with a firm of 60 and people from like all kinds of really interesting backgrounds across the US and internationally, we're bringing such like unique insights to all of our work. So showcasing that like confluence of ideas and insights from a lot of different people, I think is really important to us right now. So we're doing that through a number of ways. It's kind of like process stories. It's things totally unrelated to architecture that, our architects, our designers are exploring outside the office. It's really just kind of showcasing, I guess, the way individuals in the firm think
Yeah.
and how that contributes to the larger ethos and our larger mission.
Right. Great. Well, I like to end interviews with asking you sort of, if you could leave our listeners with one final thought around marketing and architecture firms. So one lesson that you've learned over the years, what would that be?
It's fresh in mind because I basically just said it, but I think it's about elevating your people and your projects simultaneously.
Yeah.
The projects only happen because of the people. And for everyone online in the marketing world, I think the people are the most interesting thing. Other architects are very interested in the architecture. I think our clients are interested in the people and the process because those are the things they're going to interact with before they get a finished project.
Absolutely. That's who's going to impact it. 100%. Well, we've been talking to Michael Mantese of Eskew Dumez Ripple. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can, find me on our website. We have our emails all attached to that. Or, we have our Instagram, Eskew Dumez Ripple. Any of those avenues would be great.
Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. This was great. I had a great time.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.